Welcome to Voicing Asian American Actors, a podcast with Asian American actors chatting about the actor's life in and out of the spotlight. Here's your host, Ben Gonio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of Voicing Asian American Actors with Ben Gonio. I'm excited to have my guest on today because I've been watching his work from a distance since he graduated from Carnegie Mellon School of Drama, my alma mater, and his. He's been breaking down barriers and has been seen in a lot of very prolific projects involving television, film, and theater. Now, you may notice a small difference in our podcast cadence today. That's because we had some technical sound issues, but I think we were able to solve it. And so here it is. Let's get right to the episode. Telly is a Chinese American New York City native, Broadway and television performer, and recording artist, producer, director, and theater arts professor. He recently made his London stage debut in George Takei's Allegiance as Sam Kimura, where he was lauded as a real star that gives the show a tremendous emotional charge. And he can be seen on Marcel on season 3 of HBO's Warrior, and that premieres June 29th, my birthday. His Broadway and national touring performing credits include Aladdin in Disney's Aladdin on Broadway, In Transit, Allegiance again with George Takei and Lea Salonga, Godspell, Rent, the final Broadway company, Wicked, the original Chicago company, Pacific Overtures, and Rodgers and Hammerstein's Flower Drum Song. Television audiences will remember him as Wes the Warbler on Fox's Glee, as well as his guest appearances on Instinct, Odd Mom Out, Deadbeat, and Law and Order: Criminal Intent. Telly is featured as a performance coach for the Jimmy Awards in the PBS documentary Broadway or Bust. He can be heard on many original Broadway cast recordings as well as his solo album recordings. I'll Cover You in 2012, Songs for You, released in 2015, and You Matter, released in 2021. Now, as a theater educator, he's taught courses and master classes at Carnegie Mellon University, his alma mater as well, NYU, Nazareth College, Point Park University, and he's directed university productions at the University of Michigan and UC Irvine. More information about Telly can be found on his website at www.tellyleung.com. That's TELLYLEUNG.com. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to have Telly Leung. Hi, Telly.
Hi, Ben. How are ya?
I'm great. Oh my gosh, I've been wanting to have you on this little, ditty of mine. And I think I've known you from a distance, just seeing your work, and we came out of the same training program. And it's obviously, as an Asian American, it's always a kind of point of pride for me to know that more and more performing artists are coming out of from the AAPI community, are coming out of Carnegie Mellon. And I know of a few others. I've heard of a few others, but it's been great. You and I have been kind of on socials, so I really, really appreciate it. I know you're busy, to have a little bit of your time so that we can offer this up to the AAPI community of listeners and watchers to get to know a little bit more about you, your process, what you're doing, and where you're going.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled to be here, and I have to say, Ben, your name was always somebody that your name was always a name that popped up a lot among the
Oh,
faculty and also folks that were my seniors.
oh,
That class when I was a freshman, because they would have crossed paths with you as well, and
yeah.
so for sure, I'm really excited that we're getting to meet in this way. So this is great.
Yes, thank you again, Telly. Okay, so let's jump right in. I've compiled just four basic questions because this podcast breezes along here. So I'm gonna start with the it's actually a two-part question. Can you I don't know you if you can talk too much about it, but can you chat with us a little bit in general terms about your current project on HBO Max? I guess it's Max now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I am a brand new character on season 3 of the HBO Max, or now currently called Max show, called Warrior. And Warrior is actually a show that is inspired by the writings of Bruce Lee. It was an idea that Bruce Lee had that he never got made before he passed away. His daughter Shannon found some of these notes and these ideas written down and brought it to originally to Cinemax, first of all. And they made 2 seasons of the show on Cinemax. Well, as you know, with everything showbiz nowadays, there are so many mergers and things happening, who's buying who, and it ended up being that Cinemax stopped making original content. So here was this really critically acclaimed series that had 2 seasons on Cinemax, and all of a sudden Cinemax says, we're not doing them anymore. When HBO acquired Cinemax, they said, hey, let's put both seasons on our platform so that people can still watch it. So the first 2 seasons of this show, Warrior, is actually available to be streaming now on Max. The show gained a lot of popularity, actually, during 2020 when when the Asian communities were experiencing a lot of hate crimes. And there were all of those Stop AAPI Hate campaigns going on. Well, I think during that time, a lot of people wanted to find Asian-centric stories to be more empathetic, to understand the experiences we were going through. And Warrior sort of had a resurgence of viewership because of that. Warrior is about the Chinese immigrants in the late 1800s. So this is during, when the Chinese came over here to work on the railroads in the United States. This is right before the Chinese Exclusion Act. And it all takes place in San Francisco, Chinatown. Now, this is a very different version of San Francisco than we all know. This is the San Francisco that looks more like the Wild Wild West of the Gold Rush than it is what we know of today. And a lot of the story of Warrior is about the Chinese immigrants and what they went through in the assimilation process, and also the competition that they felt with Irish immigrants that were sort of the immigrant population that was there before them. And of course, with anything Bruce Lee, there's tons of martial arts and lots of action and romance as well. So, so for my friends who are TV watchers, since Succession just ended, if you need another series to binge, go and binge Warrior, the first 2 seasons, so you can catch up and be ready for season 3 on June 29th.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Telly. All these digital streaming platforms are so saturated. There's just so much out there, and there's great quality there too, right? And so the Warrior has always been something that I was like, okay, I've got to get in there and watch it. Got it. Now I'm sold. Now I really have to watch it, especially now that you're on. I've had colleagues of mine who have raved about that show, the first 2 seasons, and said, "You have to watch it. It's so good." So folks, tune in. I'm gonna definitely. When does June 29th, right?
June 29th. And I'm a brand new character, so you'll see me pop on the second episode. And I mean, it's so funny with television. They sort of, I play a gay Chinese singer who travels the world, singing from port to port, which is basically my life anyway. So there's very little acting required on my part.
So great. This is a good segue to my other question here. So, Telly, was there a moment or event that was a catalyst for you to pursue the performing arts as your calling?
Yeah, I always say that Rent was the show that made me want to do theater. Before Rent, I'd certainly seen Broadway shows. Rent was not my first Broadway show. I grew up in New York City, so Broadway was literally a token ride away, or a MetroCard swipe ride away nowadays for all the kids who don't know what tokens are anymore. But I was so privileged to live in New York City and have Broadway in my backyard, right? And of course, I went to public school, and oftentimes they would take you to student matinees of things. And I remember my first Broadway show was Cats. And, and I enjoyed it. It was great. It was a lot of fun. It was really well done. But, everybody's a cat. I didn't really see myself in that show. And then the next Broadway show I saw was Crazy for You, which was phenomenal. Susan Stroman, choreography, tap dancing, Gershwin tunes. I think I saw one person of color on stage. There was always that token dancer, that one person that was a person of color in a big show like that. And this is, the early 90s, right? So again, I didn't really see myself. And then when I saw Rent, the diversity, the show takes place in New York City, and the diversity of New York City was actually reflected on that stage. And it was the first time that I sat there and went, oh, here is a show that takes place in New York City. It looks like New York City. I'm a New Yorker. I'm born and raised in New York City. I could be in this. I understand this show. I understand this show in my bones, in my blood. So really, that was the first time that I saw possibility for myself.
Wow, that is so odd. So, when you did Rent, what year was that?
It was 2006, and so it was exactly 10 years later from me seeing the show. And I have to admit, I was a Rent head. Like in the summer of '96, after Rent won the Tony, and it was a big smash hit. It transferred from New York Theater Workshop and went uptown, and Rent was the show that created the $20 rush seat, because they knew they had this show that was downtown, and they realized that they were quickly becoming a hit. And of course, the show was about bohemian artists not paying their rent, and they go, here we go. Now we're the big Broadway hit where you can't get a ticket for months and months out, right? So they decided to reserve the first 2 rows of that theater to be sold only on the day of the show, and only for $20. So here I was, a high school student in New York City, and I would go to the Nederlander Theater on 41st Street and sleep on the sidewalk at 4 a.m, so that to wait for the box office to open at 10 a.m. to get one of those coveted seats in the first 2 rows. And that summer, I think I did that 14 or 15 times, seeing Rent that way. I was absolutely a Rent head. So by the time, fast forward 10 years, the stage manager is putting me into the show. And I have 3 weeks to learn my track in the show, and also learn my understudy track as Angel. And she was like, are you sure you've never done this show? You know this show really, really well. And I said, Crystal, who was our stage manager's name, I said, Crystal, I've been doing the show in my head for 10 years. Yeah. I know everything about this show.
Wow. Well, it's interesting to note, and I'll repeat it again, the kind of central theme that you had mentioned about seeing yourself represented, seeing an aspect of yourself, seeing the diversity that was portrayed in that piece, that was pretty big for you in kind of motivating you, right? To go, yes, and yes. Here's this space, and let's go.
Yeah.
All of who I am into this thing, and that's really critical. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, Rent was also the kind of show, Rent was all about accessibility, not only the $20 seats that, let 16-year-old me, go see Rent like 15 times that summer. But it was also, Rent at the end of the day is a show that's just tables, chairs, lights, right? And humanity on stage. Like, what was front and center were these people. And, you have to understand that in 1996, what had come before this, the big hit musicals that were quote unquote hits, were not that. They were the big mega British imports, right? Like Les Mis, which had the big turntable, and Miss Saigon, which had a real helicopter fly on stage, and, Phantom of the Opera with a chandelier, and Cats, with lots of dancers and cat makeup. Like, it was almost like it was escapism. And how do we leave the world, which, in the 90s, we lived in a tumultuous world, of income inequality and HIV and AIDS. And here was a show that said, no, the world that's outside is important. And it's important to bring that world into the theater and hopefully tell a story that reflects what's actually happening in the world, so that we leave here, so that the audience can leave here seeing that world differently. Wow. And so, for me, I was like, I'm a kid. I grew up in the 90s. I grew up in New York. I could immediately connect to that show. And because there was nothing else there but tables, chairs, and actors being them, being themselves, being present with each other and themselves, it made it fully accessible to me. I said I could do that. You know, I can tell stories like that. I don't need a big chandelier or a turntable to tell stories. I can tell stories with tables and chairs and lights as long as I'm bringing my own point of view and humanity to it. I can do that too. So it really opened up a lot of possibilities in me as an artist. And I don't even think I knew that at 16. I don't think I could verbalize that at 16. Now at 43, I can verbalize what happened to me. But I think that is exactly what happened in my subconscious. I went, I can do this. Anybody can do this, as long as you're willing to put your humanity on the line and tell a story authentically.
Wow. Thank you, Telly. That's beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that. So let's go a different direction.
Mm.
A follow-up question to this is I'm really passionate about wanting to kind of find out how each artist navigates their own process in challenging situations. So I'm interested, Telly. Is there a moment that you can describe in your process as an actor that you'd say made you grow or challenge you in a profound way? Um, is there a moment like that you can share with us?
Yes, it's interesting. It's not necessarily the moment that pops into my mind immediately isn't necessarily a moment of me as an actor. It's actually a moment that I had as a director. And it's a moment that I had directing university students. You know, my first job directing was directing Godspell at the University of Michigan. This was during the height of COVID. You know, this was March of 2021. So we had just come off not only a pandemic that forced all of these students into Zoom University, right? But we had also just come off George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, people marching in the streets, a tumultuous time and a time of real reckoning, but for racial and social justice, but also important because we were finally getting to the nitty gritty of having the kind of conversations that were necessary to have. You know, as you and me as people of color, I think we always understood that there were systems in place that were just not fair and not equal. As much as our country says liberty and justice for all and equality for all, I think you and I growing up as people of color in this country, we're like, that's not necessarily true. There's different rules for different people based on the color of your skin, based on your gender, you know, based on your sexual orientation, whatever that is. And finally, I felt like we as a world, because the whole world stood still enough for us to have this conversation, we said, this is the vocabulary we're going to use. These are the systems that we're actually trying to dismantle to try to get to a better place, to try to get to be more compassionate, empathetic people, to try to move society forward in a better way. And, you know, I'm 43. So I think so much of my career over the last 20 years, especially after graduating Carnegie Mellon, has been navigating these systems. Well, here I am directing university students, 18, 19, 20, 21, and they inspire me because for them, they don't put up with these systems at all. They know that the world that they want to inherit is a world in which some of these systems are examined and some of them dismantled. So I often found that when I was in these rooms, first of all, it's as a guest director and as a guest faculty member, as somebody who's 43, I think it took me some time to earn the trust of a 20-year-old Gen Z student, right? Because I think so often they look at us and they say, well, you adults, you ruined this world for us, whether that's climate change or them feeling not safe in classrooms because at any moment, you know, an active shooter can come in their classroom. And so for me, I had to understand where they were coming from with what was the world what is their perception of the world and what is my perception of the world, and how is that different than when I was 20 years old and in their shoes at Carnegie Mellon University. And I think I had to take a step back and say, I'm going to have a moment of grace here for you, students, and also understand that me as an educator and me as somebody who's leading a room, as your director, I can't train you the way I was trained. That doesn't work anymore. And I can't direct you the way I was directed. Back in our day, directors often said, go to stage right 2, say this line this way, hit your light, figure it out later. This generation doesn't do that. And we just said yes. This generation goes, yes, but why? Why are we doing that? And they question a lot more. And, my ego as the adult leading the room, I think I at first, the initial instinct is defensive. Well, just do it. I'm your director, right? And actually, I went, no, I can't actually do that because that doesn't work anymore. Actually, we're all trying to do this in a better way, in a kinder way, in a way where there's more transparency. So that means I have to take a step back and have a little grace for them and where they're coming from. But grace is a two-way street, and I demand that of my students as well. Now I say to them as a teacher in the room, I don't know everything. And believe it or not, this education is a two-way street. I am also learning from you, but that means that you have to have some grace for me, knowing that I've been brought up in a different world with different standards, with different definitions of what work is, of what professionalism is. It is different, right? So you have to have a little grace for me as I try to learn. And if we can have a little bit of grace for each other, we'll get along fine. There won't be such a wide chasm between the generations as we try to forge ahead, right? But it does require a certain amount of grace to navigate that with each other.
Yes. It's so. All of this is really resonating for me, and we can have another podcast or two about this, Telly. And you're the truth that you're speaking. Yes, the pick a reckoning, right? Just of late has really challenged artists to kind of navigate a way of redefining what it means to be an artist in relationship to the world around them. And those things I'm currently navigating now as we come out of this pandemic of how do I lift communities up now that we've broken all of these reckonings into very difficult conversations, and we're all these culture wars. How can I be an artist that will because it's just so, at the risk of sounding simplistic, it's just like, well, I hope to do theater so that we can shed light into the world, and it could be a mirror and all of this, and I appreciate that there's space for that, and I understand that, but I'm like, what I'm hearing you say, I really feel like you're in the forefront of making really positive change, because you're right there in the thick of higher education, and while continuing your professional work, and navigating those landscapes can only inspire and continue to evolve you as an artist in really meaningful, deep, interesting ways. And it sounds like it's already happening. I'm so just inspired by what you just said. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I think the pandemic is something that has changed all of us forever, right? There are those moments that I feel like we all remember. 9/11. I was actually at Carnegie Mellon my senior year for 9/11. It's something that changes you forever, right? And I think coming out of this pandemic, it is such a traumatic event, a worldwide traumatic event that we all need to unpack and heal from it. And it's interesting, like me, if anything, I know it was a very dangerous time for our profession and our industry, but I doubled down. I said, if anything, we need theater now more than ever, because we're all still trying to figure out what happened to us for 3 years, and how do we come out of that? All, not just COVID, but also the conversations we're having about racial and social justice. So for me, it's become, the work that I do in higher education, the work that I do with students, with the next generation, is just as important as getting up on a stage and performing now. Because I really do believe, at the end of the day, theater is storytelling, and storytelling is our most powerful tool to increase empathy for each other, right? That really is, at the end of the day, the goal is to make all of us understand that none of us have to navigate this world by ourselves. We don't have to agree about everything. We don't have to see the world the same way. We don't have to be of the same faith, but we do have to coexist on this planet together. And it's going to be a lot easier for us to do that if I understand your experience better. And that does require that I take myself out of my experience and try to walk in somebody else's shoes for a minute. And that is, at the end of the day, what theater is about. And that is, at the end of the day, what empathy is. And if we all sort of did that, if we all took a step and took a second to do that in our lives, something that actors do 8 shows a week is exactly what I do, is I leave myself at the stage door and I become somebody else and literally walk in somebody else's shoes 8 times a week and see the world through their eyes. Like, actors, yes, I know live performance was the first thing to go in COVID and we were deemed in not essential, right? But if anything, now that we're out of it, we are extremely essential. There's no way to move forward without us now because we are the expert empaths and we are the expert storytellers.
Wow, thank you, Tully. I've got 2 final questions here for you. It's moving really quick. The next question is your current sentiments about the state of AAPI representation and the film and theater industry. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this Oscars was, with Everything Everywhere All at Once. I could not be happier. It was one of those films that sort of came out very early. And I don't even know if the people that made the film knew that they had an Oscar movie on their hands. They made the film because you could tell. You could just tell by the way that they made it. They were like, we have this kooky idea. We're going to make this crazy movie and we're going to cast the people that we love in it. And eventually, I remember seeing it in the theater because I had so many of my friends say, you must go to the theater, pay full price, go to a Cineplex, vote with your dollars, and go see this. And I said, absolutely, you got it. And I remember having a very emotional reaction to it, being somebody who's queer, right? So I really connected to Stephanie Hsu's character. Growing up, the child of immigrants, that also connected with me. It also just being a Chinese American story, that also connected with me. Like I was like, oh my gosh, it's like somebody in this sort of crazy cinematic fairy tale that straddled every genre of cinema, which I loved. Like they got my life in this crazy wild thing. They captured every emotion that I felt as a son of Chinese immigrants. I was like, this is unbelievable, right? And not only that, but because it was told through the mother's perspective, because it was told through Michelle Yeoh's perspective, it gave me a better understanding of my mother, what she had to sacrifice, what she had to give up in order to come to this country to give me the life where I get to dream and be in show business because that's my dream, right? It's fast. It was amazing. It was immensely cathartic for me to see that film. So I'm thrilled that happened. I hope that opens up doors for other stories that are Asian American. I mean, it sort of already has, because my new favorite show on TV is Beef. So it's so good.
Love that show.
It is so well done. And what's really phenomenal about it is that it is so Asian American in its identity. There are moments in Beef where I watch it and I go, this is a phenomenal scene. And this isn't a phenomenal scene. This isn't a phenomenal scene in an Asian show. This is just a great scene and a great setup, right? And then there are moments in the show where I go, oh my gosh, they are so, everybody has embraced their Asian American identity in such a way where it's also extremely authentic. There's nothing false about this. It was just, I just thought it straddled the line so well. And it shows sort of the duality that I certainly go through as an Asian American, where I sometimes feel very Asian, I sometimes feel very American, and perhaps that flip-flopping of the two is the Asian American experience, that we can be equally two things at the same time, right? So I just think that show does, and so I'm very excited, I'm very optimistic, and I just hope it's not, I hope that the powers that be don't go, check, we did it, we told the Asian story.
Yeah, and yes, as I hear you speak, I'm gonna, before I do this last question for you, I have to harken back to a moment where a casting director came to CMU and did a workshop, and I did a David Henry Wong monologue. And the casting director at the time, I'm forgetting her name, but it wasn't a pleasant experience because she, after performing the piece, she said, "Yet another angry Asian monorail." And I just remember those moments as kind of obviously triggering something. Uh, the reason I bring that up is because cut to 20, 30 years later, and here we are with an Oscars. You're seeing more representation. You're seeing the powers that be um, become more open to these stories rooted in the AAPI experience. And we've come a long way. And I thought, I mean, even when you graduated, looking at your work from a distance, I'm going, God, we've come a long way. And then just this last couple of award seasons, oh my gosh, we've come along. And I have a lot to be excited for. So that that coming from certain traumatic experiences as an Asian American actor, and then seeing all of this now, it's just been great, and I really do look forward to. I mean, Here Lies Love is going to open on Broadway,
Yes.
so I'm just optimistic.
And I that casting director. I mean, I don't deny that was a very traumatic experience for you, but also at that time when we were in school, the only Asian stories being produced were stories about our trauma. So of course they're going to be angry.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's what the people holding the power were producing, right?
Right.
And so I think what's really great about Everything Everywhere All at Once is that the movie was amazing because of its range. We saw Michelle Yeoh do what we know she can do because we saw her do it in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but then we saw her be a glamorous movie star. We saw her be, an immigrant mom. We saw the range of her experience. And in many ways, I felt like we saw the range of what's possible when it comes to portrayals of Asian people in the media. So through that one movie, because of all those alternative universes, what the Daniels brilliantly did was here's Asian people. They can be all of those things. And and that happens in the world of musical theater too. Right now, there's a lot of very heated discussion about, well, we cannot do The King and I anymore. It's a dated show about white saviorism. We can't do Miss Saigon anymore, the hypersexualization and the white saviorism. I said, no. It's not like we can't do them anymore. It's that for many years, those were the only two things casting Asian people. So of course we're sick of doing it because we're sick of only showing the hypersexualized women and our trauma and the white saviors saving us from situations. Like, yes, let's find other stories that have a wider range of our human experience. Those shows it's not like those shows are bad. It's Rodgers and Hammerstein. It's a good show. It's well crafted. But because it was the only representation of our experience, it felt like we couldn't do them anymore. But I actually don't think that that's right either. We can't just erase this piece of art that's given people not only joy and entertainment, but has given a lot of Asian actors jobs.
Yeah. All right. So we're down to 2 minutes. Really briefly, Telly, here's the last one for you. What advice would you give AAPI artists or folks within the community wanting to pursue a path like yours?
Show up. That is my biggest piece of advice. The more we show up, the more we are undeniably here, and people cannot erase us if we keep showing up. And I know it is discouraging because I know our community has a huge win last year, winning Oscars and things, and that's amazing. But we still have a long way to go when it comes to representation, and I hope that with all of the wonderful things that have happened for our community in the last 5 years or so, right? It is really amazing that I hope it encourages people to go to those auditions, show up. Don't uncast yourself before you've gone to that audition. I often find Asian actors saying they're not looking for an Asian actor to fill this role. They're not. You actually don't know that. If you show up and tell them and show them why it can be you, all of you, not just the color of your skin, not just your race, but your humanity, what you bring to a role, then it will be undeniable if we show up in forces. So that's my big advice.
Thank you so much, Telly. It's been an honor to have you here. Whenever you're in Seattle, let's keep in touch. My mother would be happy to cook Filipino food
Yay!
and set you up for the night. Okay.
Absolutely, you got it.
Telly, great. And I look forward to your episodes coming up here on Max, The Warrior, premiering June 29th. Thanks again, my friend.
Thank you, Ben. It was great connecting with you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to our guest, and we hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Be sure to tune in next time on Voicing Asian American Actors.